Okay, so for my first reaction video, we all watched a video on modern discrimination, and it's different than what I was expecting, with some portions still aligning with what I would have more expected. But the video is called "Modern Discrimination: Subtle but Significant." So it's by a lady who's a feminist. She went to Smith College and Texas A&M. And throughout all of this, she performed a lot of studies that back up every single thing she says with pretty significant results that I would say are pretty accurate when I thought about it more, and pretty good. So I'm just going to summarize what she went over really quick, pause and say my thoughts on a couple things, and that'll be about it. So she goes straight into saying that there are gender issues, discrimination, and how the face of discrimination has changed. And 50 years ago was the initial Civil Rights Act, and obviously there's been a lot of different things that have came out, like she said, things to help people that have physical handicaps or anything like that, physical disabilities. And then she asks, is discrimination a thing of the past? And I think we can all see with everything that's happened over the last few months that very, very outright discrimination is still very much a thing, but she focuses a lot on the subtle discriminations of our society. So when there's like two types, so interpersonal discrimination. So she said to imagine someone you don't like and put them in front of you, and what's your initial reaction? Fake smile, turn away, kind of not really acknowledge them that much, not go out of your way to make a conversation like it would be if it was someone that you liked. So she did a study with hats, and it was in Texas, and one of them said Texan and proud, and one said gay and proud. And she sent the peoples in the stores to ask for jobs, and people with the gay and proud hats naturally had less eye contact from the people that they were talking to about the job, had shorter interactions, and overall it showed a heavy amount of interpersonal discrimination. And when you think about it, that's probably not too big of a surprise. Trying to keep religion and politics out of it, but that's just pretty natural for probably Texas, which is more of a western area that has probably different views than, like she said, of California, which has probably a heavier amount of people who support gay rights and gay marriage and all that stuff. And Texas might not be that. Not to say that all people from Texas are that way, but some. And then she gets into Whitney and how they kind of like fake her weight, make her look heavier sometimes, make her look her normal, skinnier self sometimes. And Whitney was still greeted and helped, but there was still heavy amounts of interpersonal discrimination shown between people not really being as interested to help her. She talks about another study where people were taking in like a Blizzard from Dairy Queen or a Diet Coke, and the people who were bringing in Blizzards weren't getting the same amount of help, or kind of that same interpersonal discrimination where they aren't as willing to help or wanting to help. And so subtle discrimination is these different type of short interactions, kind of like cold shouldering people, not showing as much interest in them because of their weight, their beliefs, anything like that. And she says that could actually be probably more of a problem, like I said. So I think that she's right when she says that formal discrimination is probably easier to get over with, because a lot of times she says you can kind of just be like, well, I guess that's their problem, not mine. And I kind of agree with that. If someone just like, I'm really tall, someone doesn't like me because I'm tall, that's not really my problem. And I'm not saying that's a type of discrimination, that's just an example that came to my head. But I feel like in a lot of instances, when someone is rude to someone because of their skin color or anything like that, I think a lot of people could just be like, oh, I guess they're just stuck in the past, their views are altered because of something they've been taught or something they've learned. And truthfully, I think it's ridiculous that people still feel that way, but that's how our society is. But I think it's ridiculous that interpersonal discrimination is that big of a problem too, because interpersonal discrimination is harder to shake off. She kind of says this, but you got to think, when someone is discriminating you in an interpersonal fashion, you go off after the conversation or whatever interaction you had, and you wonder what's wrong with you. You wonder why she didn't like you, what about you. So you go through like this scan of your personality and yourself and sit there and pick out all these things that you think you could be doing wrong, and it's really probably just them, because people aren't always going to agree with you or like you. That's just the world we live in. But I think it's easier for people to relax and take a deep breath when they are just written off because of their skin color. Because, I mean, if people actually feel that way, that's stupid. If they don't like you because of the way you look, anything like that, that's stupid. But interpersonal discrimination sometimes, I think, gets people caught up in maybe old things that used to bother them, and they've moved on from it, and then it just like resurfaces all those problems. And I think that's absolutely terrible. That's not something that people should have to deal with, but unfortunately it is. So, like I said, interpersonal discrimination might be subtle, but it makes you question yourself in a lot of different ways. So, another study she kind of mentioned was the whole she might be good, he is good. And that's like saying you go in for a job interview and it's a girl, and say it's a girl interviewing you, because she said it was both men and women that have done this to both men and women. So girl interviews a guy and thinks, oh, he is good, but because she's female, she'll put down she might be good, when they could be equally qualified candidates. And that just doesn't make sense, because there are millions of talented women in this world, and everyone should be given an equal shot, not just because they're men or women. And so what those types of statements, the he is good, she might be good statement, are called is doubt raisers. And like I said, they're done by both men and women to men and women. So when you go into the workplace and they rated performance and looked at different types of discrimination, the performance was much, much worse when it was interpersonal versus formal, because it's harder for people to move on from that interpersonal discrimination. And people have a easier time moving on from formal discrimination, but that's not to say that it's not still bad or hard to deal with for people. So, let's see. So there's things that we can all do about this. One of them is to have we have an active role to reduce interpersonal discrimination. One of those things is to just avoid stereotypes. Don't think of what this world and this society's pumped into your head, and don't let it get to you. So the whole stereotypes, I mean, you can do it to anyone for just about anything, and 98% of the time they're probably not true. Everyone judges a book by its cover now, and that's just not fair. So overall, it was really informative. It's surprising. I don't know why going in I would have thought that more outright discrimination, like formal discrimination, would have bothered someone more, but as she pointed out, it kind of is just easier to get over, and interpersonal discrimination makes you question yourself. So I thought it was really informative. Thanks.